see. The pathway to the chapel. Yeah.
You had anything to eat or drink, and you had to make your way through a crowd that didn't like you very much, it was probably a different trip than coming up some stairs. The disc under the center of the altar represents the spot where the cross was placed on Calvary. The bronze plaque to the right indicates where the rock split upon the death of Jesus. If you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you can go under the altar, you can look through the plexiglass and see up through the to the sky. Behind the altar is a bronze cross indicating this is the third replica shrine here in the upper church. Behind the altar is an artist's conception of the crucifixion and death of Jesus. You see the gathering darkness over Jerusalem on the right. The soldiers are casting lots for his clothes. The soldier offers him drugged wine on the end of a lance. At the feet of Jesus leaves Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is one of the few disciples believed to have stayed with Jesus through the crucifixion and death. Next is Mary and the Apostle John. John is the only apostle believed to be present at the crucifixion and death. The others are believed to have watched from a nearby hillside out of fear. There's an important moment where Jesus says to John, "Son, behold your mother," and to Mary, "Mother, behold your son." In the Hebrew tradition, a woman that has no husband or son is destitute. So, according to Jewish law, this is Jesus formally asking John to take care of his mother. In theological events, this is officially where Jesus asks Mary to be the mother of the church. There are Jesus' followers on the left, and of course the good thief, and on the other side, the bad thief. If you turn and look at the main church, you can see the central altar covered by a bronze canopy. On the four pillars are carved the 12 apostles. Directly across from us, above the tomb, you can see the transfiguration on Mount Tabor, where Jesus revealed to himself the three of his apostles. Peter, James, and John is present. Whenever Jesus went off, he usually took 2 to 3 apostles with him and their names. This is important because in Hebrew law, for something to be true, you need the person who did the action and at least 2 witnesses. He normally took Peter, James, and John. Peter was murdered in Rome. James was the first apostle martyred. John was the last apostle to die. When the monastery opened in 1898, it was very unusual for the Transfiguration to be the main altar. Prior to Vatican II and Mass facing the people, the altar was pushed against the stone of unction, and at consecration, the priest would travel up the stairs to the Transfiguration altar, consecrate the host, and then come down for communion. We tried to figure out why Father Godfrey did that. Everything done in the church was done for a teaching reason. So was it because Jesus knew he was going to triumph over the tomb? Was it because John was present at both events? And then if you recall, Pope John Paul II added 5 mysteries to the Rosary, the luminous mysteries or mysteries of light. The 4th is the Transfiguration. So Father Godfrey was probably ahead of his time or had inside information. In the Washington and surrounding dioceses, they now have Transfiguration parishes. So this is not uncommon to be the main altar of the church. From here, we're headed to St. Anthony's Chapel. If you look at the crowd scene over here, you see a gentleman with a beard, and his dress has lapels. They didn't have lapels at the time of Jesus. He's dressed as a 13th century Italian merchant. That's the architect who designed most of the work here in the monastery. So you have now met the architect. Please use the handrail. There's remains on top, the symbols around the edge indicating he's a Christian. There's a painting of him here. We're heading to that right next. This is what he looked like as a Roman general. These are his remains on top. The symbols around the edge indicating he was a Christian. There's a painting of him here, and we're headed in that room next. This is what he looked like as a Roman general. These are his remains on top. The symbols around the edge indicating So this is the big room I allegedly said was down here. With a lot of people in it, it looks different. The walls depict life, death, and resurrection. On the left, you have the New Testament. On the right, you have the Hebrew Scriptures. When the monastery opened, these were all tapestries. So over the years, they were converted to mosaics. In the corner, you have the resurrection of Lazarus. This is not part of the catacombs. This is where the monks say Mass in November for the repose of the soul of the recently departed. It separates the Roman-style catacombs from the catacombs after the Christian persecutions. The Saint Benignus was a Roman general in the 2nd century. He started off persecuting Christians, noticed they were different, and became one. Absolutely terrified the Roman authority. He had wealth, he had power, he had position, he had an army. And he threw it away to become a Christian. Christianity was considered treason. If you broke a Roman law, they killed you. You hurt a Roman citizen, they killed you. You killed a Roman citizen, they killed 10 of your people. Christians weren't afraid to die. I can't kill you, but if you do, go ahead, not a problem. My parents heard the Sermon on the Mount. I heard Peter preach once. Go ahead, kill me. I'm going to go right to heaven. I'll be a martyr. This will be perfect. I'm going to use people I love, people I care about, best of all, no Romans. Absolutely terrified Rome. They controlled the entire known world through fear of death. Christians weren't afraid of them. And that meant it was considered treason. And so that's why Christians were crucified. So when you look at the symbols around the Benignus, none of them were a cross. That's because the early Christians didn't use the cross. It was too intimate a reality. It wasn't until after Constantine became emperor in the 4th century that Christians were allowed to practice in the open. Constantine wanted to be emperor of Rome. He took his army outside Rome, said, make me emperor. The current emperor said, no, thank you. He outnumbered 3-1, conquered Rome the next day. As a favor to his mother, St. Helen, so always listen to your mother, he removed Christianity from the list of prescribed or outlawed religions. That meant Christians could practice in the open. Last Sunday, we celebrated the Feast of Christ the King. That's the official beginning of the church year. So it's Happy New Year. The Feast of St. John Latimer usually precedes Christ the King. The Latimer family donated their basilica to be the first church So Roman architecture is church architecture because the first churches were in Rome. Once Christians could practice in the open, they decorated the catacombs. In the early days, they would hide in the catacombs to bury someone who had died, and often they'd say Mass. Other people coming to bury someone in the catacombs would see them, turn them in, and that's how many Christians were caught in a martyrdom. In the early church, if you had the remains of a saint, a martyr, you tried to follow the Hebrew tradition and cover them with a marble top, because they were wealthy, they were going straight to heaven. So the custom became remains of a saint, marble top, Saint Mass. And so our modern altar comes from that tradition. When Pope Benedict Emeritus was head of the Curia, under Pope John Paul II, they removed the requirement for a relic to be embedded in an altar to have an altar consecrated. All of the altars in the monastery have an altar stone, where in the top of the altar is sealed the relic of a saint. The only exception is the one for St. Benedict, because the reliquary is on top. So you have the remains of a saint in a marble top, so it's a consecrated altar. Once Christians could practice in the open, they wanted to be buried near martyrs, so they created martyrs' crypts. So in the back here, there are two martyrs' crypts. On the right is one with Saint Sebastian. Sebastian was a Roman soldier, started off persecuting Christians, noticed they were different, and became one. You might notice a theme. Saint Sebastian was a centurion, that then he had 100 men under him. He was also part of the Praetorian Guard, that then he was part of Caesar's personal bodyguard. When the Romans found out he was secretly a Christian, they thought, since he was well liked by his men, it would be fun to have his own men kill him. He could not be put to death in the arena. Roman citizens had the right to die honorably. His men took him up on the Appian Way and they shot him with arrows. Since they liked him, they only hit him in the leg. He's got 3 arrows in his leg. You'll see a representation of him under the altar. According to Roman law, you had 3 chances to kill someone. If they didn't die, they were innocent and got to go free. They left him by the side of the road. Local Christians nursed him back to health. He left Rome about 2 months later. 2 years he came back to Rome, trying to convert Caesar, and was killed on the spot. He's known as the double martyr. He died twice, once with arrows, and the second time when he tried to convert Caesar. He's the patron saint of athletes and the patron saint of soldiers. Saint Benedict is the patron saint of soldiers. From Saint Sebastian's crypt, I'm going to ask you to go across to Saint Cecilia's crypt. Saint Cecilia is the patron saint of music and musicians. Trick question. What's her instrument?
Voice.
Very good. Her voice. She was a young girl, about the age of 14. She was secretly a Christian, daughter of a wealthy family. She was marrying the son of a wealthy Roman family. Good marriage for both families, combined a lot of money. But for Cecilia, who was secretly a Christian, and she had to marry a pagan. She converted her husband to be to Christianity. On their wedding day, he went to bury Christians killed in the arena, who was caught and martyred. 2 days later, she went to bury him and was caught and martyred. Now being the wife of a Roman citizen, she had the right to die at home. They took her to her home. They attempted to steam her to death in her bath. That didn't work. They sent an axeman in to behead her. For whatever reason, he didn't succeed. Either they had tried 3 times or they wanted her to suffer, but he only partially severed her neck. The legend of St. Cecilia is that she lay on the floor of the bath, bleeding to death for several days, the entire time singing the praises of the Lord. Anyone in Rome hearing her voice converted to Christianity, including the soldiers guarding the house, and 2 years later, her executioner. The local Christians realized that this was probably a setup between the killing of her husband and her. They were afraid the Romans would do something to desecrate the body, so they hid her away in the catacombs. More than 500 years later, the Pope at the time commissioned St. Cecilia's church. They bought her house, they turned it into a church. The Pope sent workmen to retrieve her body from the catacombs so it could be placed under the altar in a place of honor. When they opened where she was entombed, roses poured out. You'll see her body as they found it. The clothing and linens buried with her did not decay, nor did the body of Cecilia. Cecilia is one of the incorruptible saints. meaning her body did not decay after death. They found her lying face down with her neck partially severed. They ran and got the Pope, brought him into the catacombs. When you take a look at how she's positioned, you'll see that she's holding 3 fingers on one hand and 1 finger on the other. The Pope at the time declared that discussions in the Catholic Church are over. There are 3 persons in one God, and incarnation is true. God is both God and man. Our sister Cecilia was returned to us intact so that you might believe. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to go, there's 3 steps behind the altar. Please use the handrail. I ask you to go in on the right side. As you go back, you're going to see 2 stairwells, one on your right and left. If you were waiting to go into the arena, that would be your view before you were led out into the arena. Facing you are 2 saints that were thrown in the arena, and animals refused to eat them, just like Daniel in the lion's den from the Hebrew Scriptures. You'll pass a couple niches in the wall. The faithful wanted to be near the martyr's crypts. On your right is Saint Sebastian. On your left is Saint Cecilia. I'll draw your attention to the wood carving under the altar here. It's one of the oldest pieces of artwork in the monastery. It shows the suffering souls in purgatory. It's from the 700s or 800s. If you look near the center top, you can see a gold chalice being extended by a hand. That's the Blessed Mother offering succor or relief. So please go back on the right side, take a look around, come back on the left, and I'll wait for you here. There are 2 more stops on the floor.
This must be Saint Cecilia.
You get baptized, receive the Eucharist, and then confirmed. And then you be taught when you're traveling. Draw half a fish in the sand. The other person in Christian community, and were never found out. The normal way a Christian was found out was burying someone in the catacombs, or they weren't miserable like everybody around them, and so they watched them and figured out that they were Christians. The sign of the fish, you'll see a lot of people use it today, but they probably don't know its origin. When you hear that there were 5,000 at the multiplication of the loaves and fishes in the Sermon on the Mount, there were 5,000 men. They never counted the women and children. So if you hear that 100 were killed in the arena, whatever happened to the men happened to the women and children with them. The next altar we're going to go past was originally consecrated in honor of St. Anne and St. Philomena to honor children. A little over 35 years ago, the monastery obtained the remains of St. Innocent. St. Innocent is a boy martyr. His mummified remains were found in a 1st century church. His body was prepared in a manner consistent with martyrs. These are his actual remains in a glass case under the altar. The body's clothed, the face is covered with a porcelain mask, and the hands and feet are wrapped in a gold gauze. St. Innocent was chosen to represent all unknown martyrs. If you want to take a moment at the altar, I'll wait for you in the Bethlehem Chapel. Technically today, when you entered the monastery grounds, you left the Archdiocese of Washington and you entered the Holy Land province of the Franciscans. It consists of this monastery and the Holy Land. So welcome to the Holy Land in America. It's like visiting an embassy. We follow the directives of the Bishop of Washington for announcements of Mass, for collections and things like that. But when a priest from this house swears obedience to his bishop, it's the Bishop of Jerusalem, not the Bishop of Washington. You may have noticed that when we came downstairs, there were gates that we came through. They were locked behind us. It's a free tour, but you have to pay to get out. I'm a Knight of Mount Saint Sepulchre. We're a lay group that only exists at this monastery. We help out the friars by assisting at religious services and doing the tours on Sundays. The head of the house is called a guardian. Francis didn't want anyone to be named superior. The job of the guardian is to take care of everybody in the house. The guardian, Father David, has authorized us to ask you for a donation for the upkeep of the shrines and holy places in the Holy Land in this monastery. If you'd like to do so, there's a wooden box at the top of the stairs. Thank you very much, and if I can help you in any way, let me know.
Where's the wooden box?
Oh, you just passed it. The lady's in front of you. Yeah, we try to make it hard for you. Keep telling them, we make it easy for people to give you.
Yeah, I thought you said up at the top, that's why.
Ah.
Excuse me. Again, you're fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you for the tour.
There still is a physical gift shop, but I don't think they're going to open until the room will be on.
Okay. Okay.